Hi, everybody. Welcome to our virtual town hall meeting for today, July 16th, 2020. Our focus for tonight is reopening and reimagining part three, talking about reopening schools and factors to consider. We're glad you're here with us tonight as we go forward. My name is Mike Murata. I'm the director of the Richard West Assistive Technology Advocacy Center at DRNJ, Disability Rights New Jersey. I will be our facilitator tonight and our pusher of the buttons for the slides and our person that manages the chat and the participant window. So if you have any issues, please feel free to drop them in there. I will do my best to help you out as we go. Another reminder, please make sure your microphones are muted as we go through the time. You will have an ability to participate by the chat window. So if you look for the chat window along the bottom toolbar, you should be able to see it and you can drop your information in there and our speakers will uh, participate with you that way as we get to that point of the night. Quick things as we go through, just a couple quick pieces before we actually start the conversation for tonight. Uh, at Disability Rights New Jersey, we are doing a survey and we're looking for information from the community. So if you have experiences, um, whether as a individual supporting an individual in a workshop or yourself a participant of a workshop, um, we're looking for information about workshops being closed during COVID-19, and we just want to hear some information. So if you could reach out to us at our email address, which is advocate@drnj.org. We are collecting that information. That would be great. Thank you. I'll do a quick introduction of our speakers for tonight, and then we'll jump right into it. First, we have Mercedes Witkowski from the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities. We have Colleen McLaughlin from the Bog Center. And we have Paul Aronson and Christine Baxter from the Ombudsman's office. Sorry, I got very choked up on that one. I apologize, Paul and Christine. Uh, these people will be speaking as we move through our time tonight, so you'll have their contact information after the event. And then Gwen Orlowski from Disability Rights New Jersey, another speaker. So as we go through, I did mention already, we have the chat window set up for you to participate. Please feel free. I see people already dropping information in there. That's great. Thank you. It's very helpful to put information in there. So if you have something to share, I see Robert dropped in a resource, which looks great in there. So please feel free. Put your questions, comments, thoughts in there. That will be monitored throughout, and we will make sure to pull that information back into the main conversation as we go. If you are joining us on the phone, I know we have some people joining us on the phone and not through Zoom on a computer or a tablet. If you would like to send in questions and you don't have a chat button to be able to do that, you certainly can participate if you send an email to questions@drnj.org. I will monitor that as we go through as well through our time together, and I will share that with the presenters so they can answer your questions. So ways for everybody to participate. This is a town hall. We want to hear from people. We want you to participate and get your questions answered. So again, thanks for being here tonight. With that, I'll turn it over to Mercedes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining us tonight. The three DDAC partner agencies, the Bog Center on Developmental Disabilities, Disability Rights New Jersey, and the Council, along with Paul Aronson, the Ombudsman, and Christine Baxter on his staff, are very grateful that you've tuned in this evening, and we hope that more of you will be able to watch this once the recording is released. This is the final gathering of a four-part series that we envisioned, I guess, back in April now, that was to focus on conversations, exchanges of ideas, thoughts, and comments and concerns regarding reopening and reimagining services in the adult system and wrapping up services in the children's system. We do not have all the answers, but the one thing that we have learned is that while each day we um, want to bring you the information and education and advocacy that's important to us in all of our work and our lives, we also are very committed to knowing when we need to listen to you. And these conversations are about listening. We want to hear from you. We want you to tell us what's working, the challenges that you're facing, because it's with your voices and your words that we're able to do our jobs and do our best in advocating and in informing. So if we could go to the next slide. One way that we also, in our education advocacy roles, I wanted to share two things that are important in the Ombudsman's office and important to the council. And if you can look up on your screen there, if you can't, well, I think we're going to have somebody drop something in the chat. The Ombudsman has released his second report, his second annual report, and the link is available. If you haven't already seen that, I would encourage you to take a read. And secondly, the Council on Developmental Disabilities, which I'm the executive director, every 5 years is required to complete a 5-year plan that includes what we hear from the community. So there is an opportunity, and I hope all of you tonight take a quick minute to take our survey. There's a link on your screen right now, and hopefully in the chat soon, where you can complete a short survey and other opportunities through that link to give us input so that we can shape what our 2022 through 2026 plan will include in our work and efforts. So thank you for letting me do that. There has been a lot of information shared in these sessions, and what we hear and what we continue to hear are all the challenges that you are facing, challenges of what started in a period where everything just came to a halt. So remote learning, skills that have been affected, jobs that have been affected, and so many other areas. And tonight, while we focus on reimagining children's services, we also expect we will hear a bit about early intervention services and services through the children's system of care. So please include that conversation in the chat as well. What you see right now is a link to the Road Back Plan, the Restart and Recovery Plan for Education. This is a heavy read at 104 pages, but on last week's recording, you can listen to Peg Kinsell, who gave us a very high-level overview of the important elements in the plan. We will continue some of that conversation here tonight as well. We also want to encourage you, again, one more time, to use the chat because sometimes it's, what I'm thinking is what many other people are thinking, and it's good to be validated in our thoughts, or also to be able to hear a different perspective that might help shape our thinking. Next slide, Mike. So we will be, in reimagining, we also still have many unanswered questions. I'm sure these questions will continue. I also heard some new language today. I was actually reading Middlesex County's plan or components of their plan. The new language of roomers and Zoomers. Children who will go back to school in the room and people who will go back to school via remote learning. So new technology, new words in my world, in my space today. So, in our reimagining school and reentry to children's services, what are and how will the health and safety risks be managed? How will transportation be arranged? How will face masks be worn? And what if my child can't tolerate a face mask? We hear And we've heard already about questions like how will food be served? How do I advocate if my district's plan doesn't really align with what I'd like for my child? And how do I communicate my child's very individual needs? How do I plan? How do I return to my job when I can't plan or I don't know yet what's happening? And how will remote learning work if we continue in a remote learning environment? We know, and many of us have heard about the digital divide, how technology and internet access is so important, yet so many people, so many students don't have technology and internet access to participate in a meaningful remote environment. So what I did get to listen in on today, and maybe some of you have as well, there was a press conference up in Irvington, New Jersey, where the governor, state, the Senate president, and Senator Ruiz were in Irvington talking about and announcing a $115 million initiative to bring technology to an estimated 230 students who have been disadvantaged by remote learning, and that included about $6 million for non-public schools. So that was in the Roadback Plan, a serious focus and emphasis on districts looking at narrowing the digital divide, and the initiative that at least was announced today, just a few hours ago, I'm hopeful will help bridge that divide. So more to come on that, and if you have comments on that, we'd love to see that in the chat as well. So we're gonna move to the next slide, and I'll introduce our first speaker tonight. We are delighted that we have an opportunity to hear from Renee Zamlut. She's an education advocate. She's a professional, non-attorney education advocate who has been assisting New Jersey parents since 1995. She, in addition to the advocacy that she does, she also conducts trainings and workshops for parents. And many of you may have seen Renee in some of those efforts. And I know she, in those that I've listened in on, I'm very impressed. She's actively involved in initiatives at the state and local level to ensure the rights of children with disabilities and their parents. And we are delighted to have Renee join us tonight and begin our conversation. So thank you, Renee.
Thank you for having me. At the end of March, I started receiving calls and emails from parents who were very concerned about the quality of the virtual instruction their children were receiving. And in many cases, parents were concerned about their children's inability to participate in virtual learning. So I began, once the school reopening planning began, I started soliciting information from parents. And I did that in a couple of ways. I asked parents to send me links to their district's reopening surveys, and I reviewed about 60 of those surveys personally. I sent out an informal survey to parents via social media, asking a couple of open-ended questions, basically what their concerns were, their top 3 concerns about the reopening planning process, and their top 3 concerns about the virtual IEP process. So what I'd like to present to you tonight is a summary of those concerns. And I've been gathering this information for about 3 weeks now, and I've continued right up until this meeting began. So it's just bear with me. I have 10 concerns that I've summarized, and I also have a few concerns about parents' participation in the reopening planning process. The overarching theme about their participation in the reopening planning process is they feel that their voices are not being heard. Many parents didn't receive links to surveys, so they were unable to participate. Some of the surveys were not translated into Spanish, so there were other parents that were not able to participate. Many surveys did not specifically address the needs of children with special needs or students with special needs. And many of the surveys began with a question that concerned me greatly, and I heard from many parents that it concerned them as well. It was a question about what their preference would be for the reopening in the fall. Would they want their students to go back to school in person full-time? Would they want them to be full on virtual instruction full-time? Are they interested in a hybrid of the two? And then the fourth option was, were they interested in removing their children from enrollment and homeschooling them? And when the survey started with that kind of question, it felt more like an ultimatum to them rather than actual collaboration. So that was a big concern that was expressed. Many parents tried to get on their reopening committees or their pandemic response committees in their districts, and either did not receive a response to their request or received a response that said the position had already been filled, basically, that they already had a parent on the committee, and that, you know, sorry, they just applied too late. So parents are really feeling shut out of that process. So that was the concerns with the reopening. Now, the other concerns that were expressed to me, again, I took the top 10 and I just want to go through them with you, because before we can reimagine special education, these concerns really need to be taken into consideration. And some of them you've already mentioned, but I'm going to mention them maybe in slightly more detail. There's a concern about how children are going to be responding to wearing masks or social distancing. How will this be monitored? Will it become a disciplinary issue if students are perceived as not being compliant? That was one of the top concerns. How students will be safely transported was a concern for the same reasons as social distancing and the mask wearing. Many parents talked about their concern about how the needs of their students who require one-to-one assistance will be addressed. For some students, close proximity is everything. They need prompting, they need to have someone close to them to assist them in the learning process, and parents are concerned that that's not going to happen in the way that it should. Many parents express concern about how their behavior plans could be effectively implemented under, you know, those conditions. Now, I guess the biggest concern was about regression, because many students didn't receive regular virtual instruction, or there was a big delay in services being provided. And as I said before, many were just unable to participate in virtual instruction. There was a lot of regression behaviorally, academically, socially. Parents who raised these concerns to their school districts about regression were told that they have to wait until the fall until the district can look at the need for compensatory services before this could be addressed. They were basically shut down when they tried to address them at IEP meetings. They sent letters, they sent emails. And so I didn't hear from any parents that got a response that said that we'll address the regression now and perhaps prevent further regression. They just, you know, pushed it off until the fall, unfortunately. And some of the stories that I heard were very concerning and very sad, actually. I heard about students regressing to the students who were doing well, I should say, in the fall, you know, the fall of 2019, who were regressing to the point of self-injury, regressing to the point of losing their ability to verbally communicate or use their speech generating devices. And in some cases, some students were unable to leave their bedrooms. That's how, you know, significant the regression was. Another serious concern was about initial evaluations and reevaluations. In many cases, the evaluations were just being postponed indefinitely. In other cases, evaluations were being conducted, but they were incomplete. They were very incomplete. I'll just give you one example. And I read the paperwork on this particular student, so I can verify that. And I've heard similar stories from other parents around the state. So this student had a pretty complex psychiatric profile, school phobia, depression, a social anxiety disorder, had been in and out of various programs. And this was an initial evaluation, which the district delayed until April and then finally began the process. And the only evaluations that were conducted, and they're not really evaluations, was the school psychologist sent the student a link to the BASC. The student completed the BASC and submitted it. And then the school social worker spent about a half an hour on the phone with the parent getting a social history. And the district accepted a 2-year-old psychological letter, a letter from the student's treating psychologist at the time, was no longer the current treating psychologist. And then, you know, didn't do an educational, didn't do a full psychological, and came to the conclusion that the best placement for the student was a resource replacement program, basically, that had no real therapeutic component to it. And the parent and the treating mental health professionals, of course, were pushing for a therapeutic placement for the student. So this type of incomplete evaluative process is leading to a lot of conflict and will lead to incomplete, deficient IEPs being developed that now are going to have to be implemented in the fall, and parents are very concerned about how this process is going to work. During annual review meetings, IEPs are developed without any meaningful present levels of performance information, without any meaningful information on progress, because there's no real objective way to measure progress during this distance learning period. And many of the students' IEP goals and objectives were not addressed during this distance learning period. So parents are very concerned about these inappropriate IEPs being developed and how they're going to change that once their students are back in school. Another thing is there's a lot of talk about compensatory educational services being determined in the fall, but parents have no idea about how that's going to happen, when it's going to happen, what type of assessment tools are going to be used. They have no information about that. Another issue was that some parents did not have access to translators. Parents who needed translators did not have access to them during their virtual IEP meetings. And a final concern I heard is about restraint and seclusion. Under the best of circumstances, these are very dangerous practices. When a student's wearing a mask, the danger just increases. And the close proximity and restraining someone puts students and staff at risk as well for infection. So that was the final concern. Parents are looking for options and flexibility. And a lot of the parents I spoke to really believe that they need to have an in-home, in-person option for behavioral support, for academic instruction, or some type of center-based option. And again, parents kept talking about the need for flexibility. So if something isn't working, they need to get back to the table quickly and come up with real solutions, and not wait months and then talk about compensatory educational services at some future point. So that was basically the summary of the information that I've gathered.
So Renee, we have a couple of comments, one in particular around the school reopen plan. And in particular, the question is, what about, let me just scroll up to it. Sorry, it's kind of, my screen is bouncing around. Let me get it over here. So what about the problem in the state plan where there really doesn't seem to be a factor for transmission, asymptomatic transmission, or the aerosol behavior of COVID, which makes even 6-foot distancing inadequate. And also sharing, that HVAC filtration system is just vital in reducing spread. So is there anything that you've heard also then in the work with parents that could put some color to those issues around school transmission?
Well, I know that a lot of the parents who contacted me have children who have medical issues. So they're very concerned about those points that were just raised. I don't have any easy answers to those. I don't even think, people on the planning committees are coming up with viable solutions to that. So many parents will opt for all virtual instruction because that's all, they don't have any good options really. That's why I really think it's important that some type of in-home option or center-based option where there are fewer people involved would be a good solution for some families. But as far as, the transmission issue, I know parents are concerned about it. I know parents of medically fragile students are very concerned.
Yeah.
And some parents have pre-existing conditions, so they're very concerned.
Mm-hmm.
That places risk.
So last week on our call, we also heard a question about, how do we really help students who struggle when remote learning is, preferred because in school, roomers, as they call them, is not possible for their child, but they struggle with virtual learning. So is that where you see, support, like in-home support being an option? And can you talk about what a family could ask for? in terms of in-home support?
Well, I think that, a lot of families are asking for outside agencies to get involved. Some families need behavioral support. They're asking for, ABA services to be provided from outside agencies. They're asking for tutoring services to be involved. The problem is that districts are turning them down. So this has to be part of the planning process. So it's a part of a menu of options that are available. I'm not saying that this is appropriate for everyone or should be offered to everyone, but these extra services, bringing in outside expertise should be available to those families who are in these situations. So it shouldn't be left to parents to fight these out at IEP meetings. These should be part of a menu of options.
So then, Renee, could you just kind of elaborate on the difference between homeschooling and home instruction?
Well, the homeschooling option that was included in most of the surveys I read involves a parent actually removing their child from enrollment. So that means they don't get really anything from the school district at that point. Home instruction is you keep your child enrolled. It's part of your IEP, and it's something that the district provides in your home. So it's still the district's responsibility. Homeschooling removes all responsibility from the district, just about.
That certainly sounds like a trap. I'll use that word, and I apologize if it's too strong a word, but it sounds like somebody who knows that they want their child to remain home and thinks homeschooling and home instruction might be one and of the same. Is there anything a formal process that would happen if a parent chose the wrong word to use in a home environment?
Well, homeschooling would actually involve the parent taking action. They would have to remove their child from enrollment. But some parents don't understand that going down that path completely removes or mainly removes the responsibility of their school district to provide services. So it just wouldn't happen by virtue of selecting an option on a survey, but it puts an idea in parents' minds, and they may not understand the full implications of taking that action.
Mm-hmm. Then what about the word homebound instruction? Someone just put that in the chat. Again, we're using words that are so interchangeable and could innocently be used to potentially have a harmful effect.
Well, homebound instruction, I hear it used for students with medical issues oftentimes, but I don't see a difference between home instruction and homebound instruction. Homeschooling is the dangerous word, unless parents are fully informed and that's an option that they think is most appropriate for them.
And so we're not going to judge why somebody might think that that's an option for them, but as you made very clear, that eliminates any other service from the school if you opt for homeschooling.
Just about any other, yes.
Okay. So I appreciate people kind of continuing in the chat on that, so we can come back to that. It's a little difficult to read, but I am trying to pick up some of those comments as they're coming through. So a parent in a district would be able to re-enroll their student if they made the homeschool choice and wanted to change back.
Yes, depending on what the time lag is, you most likely would have to start the whole process, the whole special education process over again.
Okay, so Sue, I saw that in your question. So if you have a follow-up to that, that question, the follow-up is that a fact or is that a guess? And I think, Renee, you want to repeat the answer to that. A parent whose district would, a parent in the district would be able to re-enroll the student if they made the choice.
Yes, of course. You can always re-enroll your child, but then you have to begin the special ed process again. So you would have to refer your child for a child study team evaluation, and they would have 20 calendar days to hold an IED meeting. And depending on how old the evaluations are, I've seen districts agree to use the prior evaluations rather than reevaluate. But they may opt for the whole re-evaluation process, which is a 90-day process.
Okay, so the clock starts ticking, right? The process starts all over again. Even if you're in, later on in the school years and you've been receiving special education services all along, you would need to be reevaluated.
Most likely, unless the district accepts the prior evaluations, if it was pretty recent, if they were pretty.
Okay. Okay. Um, and then, you know, I guess in that, in the divide, the digital divide, we heard at the council, and many of the other partners heard very early on that even a family of 3 or 4 who had one computer in the house, but 2 students use that computer, and then the internet drain and bandwidth drain, that it became a real challenge. So, and Renee, what's your sense of, schools, nobody likes to think about school restarting in a typical summer at this point, but it often also feels like it's right around the corner. Do we have a sense that those students who can use remote learning will have the ability to get what the resources that they need early on in the education process? And what can families do who have not either been identified or counted toward those without technology?
I think as the distance learning process went on, schools got better at providing the devices and internet access to families who needed it. I didn't hear a lot. I started gathering my information about 3 weeks ago. I didn't get a lot of concern about internet access and devices, but they should absolutely start communicating with their director of special services, their school superintendent now, if that's an issue.
Okay. All right. So, Renee, I know you're going to sit tight. You're not going anywhere. I'm going to come back to you, I'm sure, because there's going to be some more questions. But I'm going to, Mike, if you could go to the next slide, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is someone that many of you may know as well. Rebecca Novemsky is the parent of a young man, 21, who just recently graduated last week. Congratulations, Liam. And she's also the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities Family Support Liaison. Her contact information is also on your screen now, but Rebecca is going to give us her family advocate perspective on reimagining. So Rebecca, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. So, like many of you, I'm sure, school ended abruptly in the middle of March. Liam was in an out-of-district school placement. He had one-on-one support. He has very high support needs. You can see him there. He uses a wheelchair to get around. He uses a communication device. He uses lots of gestures and facial expressions, but he does get his point across. He needs total support in everything, including remote instruction, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But so he was doing a lot of structured learning experiences, community-based instruction. He was working at a nursing home, which of course ended very abruptly. He was working at the Dawn Center for Independent Living, helping them put together some of their packets and folders, as well as answering some of their surveys online. He was having a very rich experience. He was getting a lot of support, which ended abruptly. And then there was, for a few weeks, there was nothing at all. Then there was the remote instruction, which was a lot of work for mom or whoever was supporting him, dad at the time, who had to take family leave for part of the time in order to make this work for our family, as I work full-time, he works full-time. We also have 2 students in the home using the internet, so that could be a challenge. So there was half an hour in the morning of virtual instruction with maybe 3, maybe 4 students and a whole lot of staff. You got to wonder what they're all doing. So that was a lot of work for mom, as he is total support. And he lost really related services. He got OT, PT, speech. I mean, he got them virtually, but he's a very hands-on kid. Physical therapy for Liam virtually means, I take his leg and try to stretch it, maybe. It's not the same as him getting up in his gait trainer, doing all the things that he was able to do at school, his adaptive bike, things like that. OT, we're still working on a mask. He will not tolerate a mask. It is a goal. We've tried all different kinds, all different bribery methods and reward methods. We're still working on it. So I brought my concerns and my requests for compensatory services and thinking his IEP was not being fulfilled as it was written. He was certainly not getting the transition services that he needed to be successful in his adult life, to have competitive integrated employment with support, full support at all times he will need for the rest of his life. That was the goal, and there was no way he was working towards that. The district told me, oh, you know, it's not our fault, it's not the program's fault. Let's talk to the out-of-district placement. They're doing everything they can. It's COVID-19, there's nothing we can do. So I advocated at every level till I got to the Department of Ed, and they finally issued guidance. And then finally the district was ready to talk to me about some compensatory services, which he is getting now at a center-based program where there are very small groups of students and very small groups of therapists working with them. They all use there are 5 different groups that use 5 different entrances to the building. They take their temperature, they ask us a series of questions. I provide the transportation, or staff provides transportation. I didn't want transportation from the district, which he was always getting for the last, since he was 3 years old. I didn't feel safe. So that was something I was willing to negotiate on. So he is going to this program now for 6 weeks that the district is providing, and that is working for him. And I think that's an option that could work for a lot of students and could be something that is part of our reimagining plan.
Rebecca, just pause a second on transportation, because there was a question that came in that, and maybe we've got somebody with an answer, or we can get an answer. But if a child is receiving transportation in their district, but they're in an out-of-district placement, does the district still have to provide the transportation for that out-of-district placement?
Absolutely. He was always provided. He was never in district. He was always out of district. Transportation was always provided. That should not be different now. If it's in the IEP, it should be provided. If the parent doesn't feel comfortable sending them on one of the transportation companies and they want to provide it themselves, they can be compensated for that as well.
Renee, any feedback to that as well on your side?
That's absolutely correct. If it's in the IEP, they have to provide it.
Okay.
And it should be in the IEP if it's needed.
Okay. So, Corinne, I hope that answers your question. Rebecca, do you want to talk about the compensatory services that Liam received and or it will receive, and the duration for, like, the time span? Did you have to, was it a big hurdle to get to the point of ensuring his compensatory services? You have a little bit more to say about that?
Yeah, like I said, I started with my out-of-district case manager, who told me no. I went to my brand new director of special services, who told me no. And then I went to the Department of Education, who told me guidance is coming, guidance is coming, guidance is coming. Finally, it came at like right under the wire before, before his the summer program that I wanted for him, that he's been in for the past few summers. He was not going to have a summer program. He was going to graduate and be done at the end of June. But he is now receiving those compensatory services for most of the summer. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and my takeaway on that, Rebecca, for reimagining is don't let no stop you at least a few times.
Not in special ed, no. That's a lesson
I've been out of
a long time ago.
But yeah, so no is not the answer.
Starting with when he was much younger and they said, no, he doesn't need one-on-one support. Really? He does. And he's gotten it for years and years. And he still does. and he still needs it. And he will continue to need it in adult services. My goal for him is for him to have supported employment, and he will need full support with that as well.
So can either of you talk a little bit about, one thing that you think that folks may not know that would be a nice tip of the day if they walked away with anything else tonight? Is there an experience, something personal or that you've heard? Because Rebecca, you've also been engaged in so many statewide Department of Education meetings, and is there something that you heard that might be a good word of wisdom tonight? I'll start with
If people don't know, they have up to 2 years, 24 months to ask for compensatory services once the child has graduated by aging out.
And what about if they haven't asked for a compensatory service now, but their child is not yet aged out? What's the time frame that they could request a service if they're still enrolled in school?
I would say it would be ongoing, but maybe Renee knows better than me. I would say up until 2 years after they do age out. I don't think that would be different depending on where they are in the process.
My tip of the day would be to document the services that you are receiving if you believe they're deficient. I actually developed a sample letter. SPAN has a couple of sample letters on their website. My letter's also there. You really need to document the problem and get it to the district as soon as you can so that you will be considered for compensatory services. Like I said, it's like the wild, wild west right now. We don't know who's going to be considered for compensatory services, how they're going to measure them, what assessment tools they're using. So it's really important that you document the issue now.
Yes, document that the way that it works or doesn't work virtually for your child. Also, Renee said this earlier, but I want to emphasize, and Peg said it last week, to get involved as much as you can. My district has a lottery to be on some kind of parent panel. So I entered that lottery, and we'll see where it lands me, but I'm doing my best to express my interest in being on the reopening parent panel. See what that looks like. They asked all kinds of demographic information, which is good. That means I think that they're trying to make it balanced, including, are you on the CPAC? Does your child have an IEP? Does your child have a 504? Are they an English language learner? Are you a single parent household? I think they asked some pretty good questions.
So I see one of our guests tonight on a panel last week. It was a SPAN webinar, and she shared that even if you cannot be actively involved in the work group for your school, to ask if there's a subcommittee or some other less official, I'll call it, work group that you can participate in and volunteer for. So remain actively engaged and involved so that you have an opportunity to, be in the know and to contribute what you can contribute to the plan, the school's overall plan. There's some really excellent links coming through the chat way back to resources, several resources around wearing masks, including resources through the Bog Center and Autism New Jersey. There's also some incredible tools that SPAN has produced on advocacy resources and checklists and sample letters and compensatory services. So for those of you who are not as connected to those resources, we do really encourage you to not feel so isolated and so afraid through this process, but use the resources of SPAN and the Bog Center for additional information. I'll also say that there are family support planning councils that meet also across the state on a monthly basis. And what we typically find is that if you have a question, somebody's got the answer, and somebody's been there and traveled that road. And we are, always so grateful for how gracious families are, even as they're struggling through their own situation, to help support someone else. So add a few more questions, comments, thoughts into the chat while I'll circle back to Renee and ask her to just kind of give us some closing thoughts and comments.
Well, just to reiterate, if you can't get on the committee itself, I know a lot of school districts are holding Zoom forums or Google forums where they're discussing these issues, so try and participate in those. It's difficult to participate. It's not easy to participate in virtual IEP meetings for some parents, so bring a friend with you, someone you trust to take notes for you. Make sure that your IEP meeting is being recorded, and then you can get a link right to the meeting. You have a video recorded meeting, which could be helpful. If your concerns weren't adequately addressed during the meeting, send a very clear follow-up letter of understanding that explains what those concerns are. Request a follow-up IEP meeting so that you can have them addressed. You just have to be, unfortunately, a lot more vigilant in this environment now than you even had to be in the past. So just keep documenting and keep requesting until your voices are heard, basically.
And Renee, we know that the plan is outlining that schools come up with alternatives. So it's not, a straight shot. It's, plan A, plan B, but backup plan C. Any advice to parents as to how they can also remain flexible, because it's their individual life affected, while the school may need to regroup and redirect after they've issued their initial plan? Any advice as to how parents manage that redirection or having to, move to another plan?
Well, the problem is, I don't think the flexibility on the parent side is the issue. I think that right now we're in a situation where the IEP process is being dictated by the circumstances here rather than the needs of the student. So my advice to parents wouldn't be that you need to be more flexible. It would be that you need to really impress upon districts how this process is supposed to work, that it's supposed to be dictated by the needs of your child. And you're going to have to, unfortunately, like I said before, stay on top of it. You're going to have to keep following up in writing and make the phone calls and file for mediation and do whatever it is you have to do to have your voice heard. I don't think parents need to be more flexible. Parents of children with disabilities are the most flexible people I've ever met.
They sure are. And we've learned that definitely in the last few months, more resilient and more flexible. Thank you, Renee. And Rebecca, any thoughts, final thoughts to share and as we come toward the end?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, one size does not fit all is what I'm thinking. What works for my child might not work for your child, and you are the expert. Don't let them intimidate you. You know your child the best, you know their needs the best, and you're going to live with the consequences of the services they get or do not get. I know some people, like Renee had said, who got in-home behavioral supports for the summer as their compensatory services, and that's what's right for them. I know some students that thrive on virtual instruction, and that's what's right for them for many reasons. So don't let them intimidate you. Bring a friend if you need to. Reach out to me, reach out to the regional family support planning councils. We're happy to support you. Utilize your family support organization. Get connected to them if you're not connected to them. I think you need to stay strong. These are really hard times. It's a lot of work for mom. You are a therapist right now. You are a teacher. You are every kind of support staff that your child gets. And I never realized how many of them there were till I was in a virtual meeting with them. It takes a lot of people to do what we do by ourselves at home for so many years. And it's exhausting, but we have to stick with it. We have to stay strong and ask for what is right for our child.
And I'm just going to add, Rebecca, dads too. We had a great dad on our panel last week, Scott Cohen. If you didn't get to weren't there last week, I suggest you tune in to hear some of the remarks from Peg and Scott. But the perspective that Scott brought to our discussion last week was also not just being a dad of a young woman who is differently abled, but he is also a teacher.
In my school district.
In your district, there you go, Rebecca. And you know, for a plug for the teacher moment, Scott impressed upon me that it took him 16 hours to develop a 43-minute class as a teacher to make sure that he had all students' needs covered and included. So
absolutely, and my husband was a huge support. So I don't know how people do it without a partner, but my hat's off to them.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to
9 times out of 10, let's face it, it's mom that's doing most of the work. I'm sorry, but it is.
Okay, Rebecca, you said it.
I said it. I stand by it. Dads, come on.
Any let me see if there's anything else here in the chat side. So Tara says that the CPAG members are also sometimes holding focus groups to present concerns from special ed parents to the reopening committee. So if you're not familiar with your CPAC, this would be the time to do that, to get connected. And again, any opportunity that you can take to be engaged in the school process. They're open, they are answering phones, I'm sure. So call, get involved, email, reach out to them and to other parents. So I'm going to ask for any other final thoughts before turning it back to Mike. Okay, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I just answered a question for someone, and it's great. This slide comes up to help us. We did record the event tonight, as we've recorded all of the DD Partners town halls. All of the previous recordings and the recording from today all live on the ATAC NJ YouTube channel. So I gave you a link at the bottom there. You can go directly to our YouTube channel, which is bit.ly/ATAC videos. And that will take you to our YouTube channel. All of the videos are there, including the one that was just mentioned from last week. Kind of as an aside, but still in relation to what we're talking about tonight, through our Assistive Technology Center, we also were holding weekly town halls focused on special ed from the assistive technology perspective. So if you're interested in that, to catch up on those videos are also on the YouTube channel as well. They're not happening now in the summer, but we will start those up again probably in a couple weeks. We're giving people a little break for the summer. But I do have one quick plug before I let everybody go. We are hosting another town hall focused on assistive technology next Monday, so in just a few days, focused on race and diversity in assistive tech and augmentative and alternative communication. So if you're interested in that, the link to register is bit.ly/race0720. And with that, as we wrap up, we'll have new events coming soon. We'll work up a list of information coming soon. If you have questions that you would like to pose to the group or ideas about future topics, please feel free to email those to questions@drnj.org, and we will share them with the group and hopefully see them in a future version of the town hall. So again, thank you very much for everything tonight. Appreciate it, and hope you have a great night.